This video is brought to you by viewers like you. Thank you.
And I say, hey!
Arthur is in the middle of a Mad Max when DW comes in full fury. She arrests Arthur in the middle of the race and locks him up without a trial. Arthur says DW sometimes gets carried away, which is like saying Hitler once got carried away in Poland. DW is at the library, where a firefighter is giving a speech about safety. The firefighter gives DW a whistle and deputizes her as a junior safety officer. A hollow gesture with a meaningless title that gives DW all the ammo she needs to launch a tirade of tattling on the unsuspecting populace. DW uses her whistle to stop a kid from getting hit by a car, which is nice, but what dumbass kid just runs into the middle of the road?
Matthew!
Touché, DW. Touché. The woman thanks DW for saving her son's life, unintentionally stroking DW's ego to full mast. Arthur and the Brain are building a derby car for the upcoming rally race when DW blows her whistle directly in their face. She says the car is unsafe to drive, despite the fact that it's obviously not finished. Mrs. Reed blindly agrees with DW, forcing the boys to rebuild their car from scratch.
Better safe than sorry, that's what I always say.
You've never said that once in your life, and you know it. DW proceeds to snitch on everybody in town. Stitches be damned. She drives her family crazy with her non-stop whistleblowing and barges in on Arthur during a bath. What the fuck? Arthur and crew decide to stalk DW to catch her breaking her own rules, time that could be better spent building a dope-ass derby car for the race. DW is skipping down the street, waving her arms around like a dumbass. Arthur nearly catches DW off her guard before getting a chocolate surprise to the face. Arthur worries DW will ruin the race with her ungodly obsession with safety. The Reed parents tell Arthur he has to bring her, much to his dismay. DW says she only wants people to be safe. Her parents tell her to stop being a fucking tattletale. It's the day of the race, and DW is itching for a snitchin'. Arthur tells her to fuck off until the race is over. DW is stuck in the back of the crowd, unable to tattle to her full potential. She decides to climb a tree so she can continue to look down on everyone. As it turns out, DW is just as bad at climbing down trees as she is at keeping her mouth shut. The race comes to a screeching halt as the fire department rushes to get her down. The parents of the year show up just as the hoopla dies down. Arthur tries to lie to his parents to spare DW the embarrassment of what just happened, but she can't even avoid snitching on herself. DW tells her parents what happened, getting both her and Arthur in trouble.
You both know better.
And you know better than to let your daughter out in public without a leash. By the grace of God, DW seems to have learned her lesson, as she no longer uses her whistle to butt into other people's business. And we never find out who won the race, but it's likely Arthur's car fell apart right after the fade to black, because he wasted all his time trying to put DW in her place when he could have been building the best derby car the world will never see.
Let's review.
DW used a safety lecture as an excuse to snitch on her friends and family. She drove everyone crazy with her non-stop screaming and whistleblowing. She invaded everyone's privacy and threatened to ruin the race for Arthur. When Arthur tried to get rid of her, she put snitching above her own safety, creating a public emergency and delaying the race. And even when Arthur tried to keep DW from getting in trouble with their parents, she couldn't resist the urge to snitch one last time before throwing in the towel. F you, DW.
And I say, hey!
DW is playing with her dolls. She imagines a scenario where a bride and her servant are trapped in a lifeboat surrounded by hungry sharks. We're not even 10 seconds into the episode, and already DW's unquenchable bloodlust is on full display. DW refuses to share her toys with baby Kate, who accidentally breaks one of the dolls. DW cries to her mom that Kate killed her favorite doll, which is some very specific wording to say the least. Mrs. Reed ignores her daughter's psychopathic tendencies and tells her to play nice with Kate. DW continues to bully her baby sister, even threatening to pinch her until she cries. Mrs. Reed has had enough of DW's shit and tells her to go to her room.
But what did I do?
You were born!
DW is surprised her actions actually have consequences. She convinces herself this is all Kate's fault. DW begs her mom to let her come back downstairs. Mrs. Reed tells her she can come downstairs in 10 minutes. DW starts crying that her mom doesn't love her, which she instantly stops once Mrs. Reed is out of earshot. DW impatiently watches the clock, fearing that time has stopped. She leaves her room to find that time has in fact frozen, and she couldn't be more thrilled. She takes advantage of the moment by stealing Arthur's cookie and giving away his dog to the Tibbles.
What is wrong with you?
Surprise, surprise, it turns out it was just her imagination. Her father sends her back upstairs.
You don't have to treat me like a criminal.
We both know that's not true, and my legal team is gathering evidence as we speak.
DW is 2 minutes into her punishment, which so far she's managed to spend entirely outside her room. DW claims she has the meanest parents in the whole world. DW is such a bad liar, even her imaginary friend calls BS. DW reminds Nadine of when she was forced to be Arthur's slave while he was sick, which didn't happen, and the time her family went to Cousin Lucy's wedding without her while she was forced to stay home and clean, which also didn't happen. DW leaves her room again to beg her mom to end her punishment. When her scheme fails, DW decides to go over her parents' head and tattle to Grandma Thora. Nadine reminds DW she isn't allowed to walk to Grandma Thora's house by herself, which wasn't a problem when she ran away when Kate was born. Instead of just calling Grandma Thora, DW decides to sneak out the window until she remembers how gravity works. DW leaves her room for the 4th time in 10 minutes to find her family playing happily without her.
They don't miss me. They're glad I'm not there.
I mean, you're not wrong. Mrs. Reed asks DW to watch over Kate, which is exactly how this mess got started in the first place. DW claims Kate has been a pain in her ass all day, like when she kept DW from shoplifting, interrupted her playtime, and selfishly demanded for DW to share her toys. DW comes to the realization that she is a horrible garbage child, and apologizes to Kate. Too little, too late. Her mom comes in to tell her that her punishment is over, even though she was only actually in her room for about 5 minutes. DW now wants to stay in her room and play with Kate, but just when it seems like she's changed for the better, DW goes right back to torturing her dolls by feeding them to her sharks. Let's review. DW refused to share her toys and threatened to hurt her baby sister. When she got grounded, she spent half her punishment sneaking out of her room. She tried to paint herself as the victim by making up blatant lies about her family and tried to run away to her grandma's house. She convinced herself her parents didn't love her anymore and that baby Kate was the source of the blame. And it was only after her epiphany that DW realized how much she sucks and decided to show a shred of dignity to her sister. F you, DW.
And I say, hey!
Arthur explains how DW demands everything be equal and balanced, which is nice until you realize she's the one holding the scale. DW is using a playdate with Emily as an excuse to stroke her ego. She brags that all her toys are better. DW's pride is put in jeopardy when she discovers Emily has a French nanny. Instead of telling her mom why she's upset, DW comes up with a scheme to get a French nanny of her own. DW is having dinner with her family, and the brain, for some reason, when her parents tell her she's going to start getting allowance of 75 cents a week, which nowadays would be roughly $1.25. Not too shabby. DW plans to flex her cash to her friends, as she believes all relationships are monetarily transactional. However, she soon realizes her friends already get allowances and earn much more than she does. DW resolves to correct this problem by billing her parents for all the money she believes she deserves. The Reed parents tell her to fuck off. DW decides to go the opposite route and become a total kiss-ass. She does all the chores in the house, working herself sick and breaking half the dishes in the process. She tries to goad her mother into raising her allowance and fails miserably. DW pretends to be sick so she can stay home from preschool. She tries calling the mayor to demand everyone get paid the same amount of money, which actually isn't a terrible idea the more I think about it. DW pesters Arthur and his friends to find out how much their allowances are, which leads to the group having a fight that threatens to end their friendship for good. DW realizes she can just lie to her friends about how much money she has, even though none of them actually give a shit. Mrs. Reed tells DW she should be grateful for what she has and shouldn't be jealous of those who have more. The lesson goes right over DW's head as she struts into class acting like she's the grand fromage, which is French for pretentious bitch. DW offers to buy milk tickets for everyone in class, until Miss Morgan points out that all her money is fake. DW's ruse is exposed and has a full breakdown in the middle of class. Emily takes pity on DW and offers to share her allowance so they can stay friends. DW demands to see the money first. The Tibbles point out that Emily is more generous than DW, leading DW to try to be more generous than Emily. DW quickly backtracks and says they should each keep their own allowance. DW promises to never obsess over money again, only to immediately break her promise and hit up her grandma for extra allowance. And we never see Emily's nanny again after this episode, because she was probably murdered by DW so she and Emily could truly be equal. Let's review. DW became green with envy at the thought that her friend might have something she doesn't. When her parents started giving her an allowance, her first instinct was to flaunt it to her friends. When she realized her friends make more money than her, she tried to extort her parents for a higher allowance. She prompted a fight among Arthur's friends, which threatened to end their friendship for good. DW ignored her mother's advice and proceeded to flaunt her imaginary wealth to her classmates, only to make a fool of herself. And even after she made up with her friends, she still tried to go over her parents' heads and extort her grandma for extra cash. F you, DW.
And I say, hey!
Arthur is watching the Olympics, and DW couldn't give a rat's ass. She'd rather watch My Little Pony, until she discovers the Olympics give out gold medals. DW begs her mom to let her sign up for gymnastics, specifically so she can win awards and get famous. Mrs. Reed reminds DW she's quit every other activity she's joined after only a few days. A waste of time and money that could have been better spent on counseling and ADHD medication. Desperate for any excuse to get her daughter out of the house and off her ass, Mrs. Reed begrudgingly agrees to take DW to gymnastics lessons. DW discovers she's in the same class as Emily and the Tibble-twats. We see Emily in the company of her replacement nanny, who was probably hired after her previous nanny disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Mrs. Reed describes Emily as smart, pretty, and polite. 3 traits DW lacks in spades. DW tries to get on the balance beam so she can one-up Emily in front of the class. Her instructor tells her she won't be allowed to use the balance beam for at least a year, and has the kids pair up to do somersaults instead.
Be my partner? I guess so.
The fuck was that about? DW attempts to do a somersault and falls flat on her ass. Emily shows her how to do it correctly, only to be mocked and insulted by, "Why is this kid blue?" The kids move on to handstands, as Emily proves she's way too advanced for a beginner's class. DW's jealousy causes her to fall over, knocking over several of her classmates in the process. She then tries to do a cartwheel and manages to fall all the way off the mat. The next day, DW is practicing her moves in the most reckless way possible. She goes to the grocery store and ends up destroying the place with her shitty cartwheels. The next week in class, the kids are back to doing cartwheels when, hold on, are blue rabbits actually a thing in nature? Huh, I'll be damned. DW manages to finally do a cartwheel, only to get shown up by Emily. The instructor scolds Emily for showing off before leaving the kids alone for several plot-convenient minutes. Emily apologizes to DW because that's what a good friend does. DW rebuffs her apology and decides to do a cartwheel on the balance beam. The Tibbles goad her on as she nearly falls to her death.
Jump! Jump! Jump!
For some unexplicable reason, Emily tries to keep DW from killing herself and rushes to get Mrs. Reed and the instructor from outside. What exactly were they doing together outside before Emily got them? The world may never know. The Tibbles are giving Emily shit for being a snitch when DW tells them to fuck off. DW apologizes for being a jealous brat and Emily offers to help her improve her cartwheels. Unfortunately, DW loses all interest in gymnastics when she sees a horse on the ride home, and begs her mom to let her take horse riding lessons. Thus the snake has consumed its own tail. Let's review. DW begs her mom to let her take gymnastics despite her history of quitting every activity she's tried. She instantly got jealous of her friend and took every opportunity to try and put her down. She struggled to do the most basic moves and destroyed an entire grocery store with her janky-ass cartwheels. When Emily bested her again, DW tried to do the most dangerous thing she could think of, risking her own life. And even after she made up with Emily, she decided to ditch gymnastics after only a week to pursue riding lessons, once again at the expense of her mother's time and money. F U, DW.
And I say, hey!
Arthur is having a peaceful afternoon at the library when DW comes in to ruin the vibe. Arthur laments about being forced to bring DW even though she can't read, which is like bringing a blind man to a puppet show. DW keeps shouting at Arthur to help her read, despite the signs that say no talking. DW says she can't read the sign, even though she's been to the library before and would therefore already know the rules. Arthur tries to open the show before DW interrupts him to throw his own words back in his face.
Ricard is. The sign says no talking.
What a bitch. DW begs Arthur to check out a picture book for her. Arthur tells her to get out of here with that shit, as that weak-ass baby nonsense would fuck up his street cred. The head librarian, Paige Turner, tells DW she can check out the book herself if she gets her own library card. The only requirement, you have to write your name. Once again, DW's illiteracy proves to be the source of her own demise. DW brags about all the books she'll be able to get once she has a library card. Arthur tells her to nut up or shut up. DW spends 3 hours trying and failing to write her own name, wasting 5 trees worth of paper in the process. DW is mad at her parents for giving her a difficult name, while the rest of us are mad at them for giving birth to her at all. DW discovers she actually can write and wastes all the mashed potatoes spelling out her name.
Look how well DW Reed writes!
DW gets her library card and the power immediately goes to her head. As it turns out, the book she wanted has already been checked out. Miss Turner assures her the book will be back next week. Unfortunately for Miss Turner, DW doesn't have that kind of patience. DW calls the library every day to check if the book has been returned. 7 days later, DW wakes up Arthur at 6:30 on a Saturday. Like an asshole. They get to the library only to discover the book hasn't been returned yet. DW demands the police get involved. Arthur refuses to waste his weekend at the library and plans to leave without her. That is until DW threatens to tattle to their mom like the snitch she is. DW watches the front desk like a hawk and even harasses poor Aloysius Zimmerplatz, who only wanted to read about trains. Surprise, surprise, it turns out the Tibbleturds had the book the whole time. The terrible twosome warns her if she damages the book, the library will take away her card forever, which is a scary thought until you remember DW can't actually read, so it'd be more like taking away shoes from a guy with no legs. DW is so scared of damaging the book she keeps it hidden in a shoebox all week with her blankie, which I promise I'll talk about later. Arthur assures her the book won't explode if she opens it.
I'll open it if you're so worried.
Arthur realizes this is the first book he ever checked out, which is something he definitely would have remembered before now, considering how horny he is for books. Being a good big brother, Arthur reads the book for DW, who laments she has to return the book that day. Arthur tells her she can renew the book as many times as she wants, which immediately backfires once he realizes DW will force him to read the book to her until the end of time. And we never see Aloysius Zimmerplatz again after this episode, because after getting harassed by DW, he was too scared to return to the library. He likely entered witness protection and assumed the new identity of Beulah McKerney. Let's review. DW made a huge fuss over getting her library card so she could check out a book she can't even read, which is like obsessing over getting your license even though you don't have a car. The only thing standing in the way of her getting a library card was her own illiteracy, which she wasted several tons of paper trying to conquer. When she couldn't check out the book she wanted, she badgered the library every day for a week until it was returned. And even after she got the book, she was too scared to read it for fear of getting her library card taken away. When Arthur graciously offered to read the book to her, she rewarded his kindness with the promise of eternal tedium and repetition. So remember, kids, if your younger sibling asks you to read to them, don't play nice, because they'll make you read it twice. A day. Every day, for the rest of your life. FUDW.
And I say, hey!
Hey, I have a Patreon. Sign up at patreon.com/mattneff to get your name in the thank you credits, along with early access to every FUDW and the chance to vote for future episodes. If there's a movie or show you'd like me to talk about, top-tier patrons can commission a review for my channel. Check out the link in the description to become an FUDW superfan.
What a wonderful